Maybe I can give you a deductive argument case. So, like, like the Kalam. I'm sure you would say the thrust of the argument there is just to show that God exists, right?
Yeah, the thrust is God exists is the thrust. It's a
So
proposition. It's going to be some
think,
kind of like a proposition.
yeah, I think we both agree that if it's like a syllogism, or if it's like a syllogistic argument or a deductive argument, the thrust just is the conclusion of the argument.
It doesn't have to be. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So, as an example, dialectics oftentimes don't have a conclusion to them. So
no, I'm talking about. I said specifically like arguments in the form of syllogism, man.
It can be. Some would communicate them differently. So thrusts are going to be propositional, but sometimes they're going to be like you might include some of the other things in it. Like the thrust of the problem of evil is that God can't exist, but it's because of whatever the depending on the kind of problem of evil that you present.
Yeah, but but to be clear, is there an example of like a deductive argument where the thrust isn't the conclusion?
I just gave one. So thrusts are the central points, and so central points are more like a summary case. So, like for instance, It might not be the exact conclusion. Like the conclusion could be A and C contradict, but that's not the thrust of the argument, right? The thrust of the argument would be that A and C, whatever those things are, is impossible because it contradicts, and so one must be false. So it's gonna be like a dilemma or something like that. There's all sorts of thrusts you can make that way, even if the conclusion is not identical to the thrust.
Okay, so it's like is the thrust just like let's say like the purpose the original kind of appropriator of the tool had for it?
No, not necessarily. Like for instance, I've given you an example of this before, but I've used Wittgenstein's private language arguments. His private language argument was not meant to be used the way that I used it, but the thrust that I was using it for is to push someone to the semantic thesis. Right.
Okay,
so it might be the central point. It's going to be the central point of the argument, but sometimes it can be used differently depending on how you're using it.
Yeah. So now it just sounds like you're saying the goal the person has when they're making use of an argument. That seems like what you're saying now.
Sometimes it is. It depends.
Okay,
like the thrust of an argument. So the thrust of an argument is the central point that you're making. Is it the case that let's just ask it very simply, because you might. I think you know what a central point is. I know it's a little bit of a vague term, but I think we probably both know what a central point is. And if you don't, then this might not be.
I can give you like I can try to see. Yeah, see if you will.
Real quick.
I mean, okay. I don't know what you're. Okay.
I was going to ask, do you think that name the trait has a central point that's being made?
I don't know what you mean by central point yet. That's what I was trying to figure out earlier.
I think.
You see why maybe I should have asked that question.
Real with you, man.
Okay, I mean, I can just say like it's not like I can. I can just say the same thing about what you're saying. Like I can say like you being unclear is dishonest too. That's just not helpful to anything.
Sure, I mean I'm comfortable with I'm comfortable with the audience making their answer like.
I can say the same. I can say the same exact thing as well. I can say the same thing.
I think you can say whatever you want.
Or we could just like move on with the conversation.
Or you could just answer if you actually think. So if you're not convinced that it has a central point, then we agree.
Do you think like if I don't understand what you mean? I mean, do you think like repeating the question will be like helpful right now? I just don't understand why.
I didn't repeat the question. Did you hear what I said?
I mean, you were kind of sort of saying like if you're not convinced it has a central point, that's what you were saying, right? But that's just kind of repeating the thing I'm not clear on,
But we're both not convinced. Even if you don't know what a central point is, we're both going to be agnostic on that, right? Like I don't know that there's not a central point. I just don't know what the central point is if there is one.
No, I mean, like let's say like I'm not even sure what the claim is. So like for example, you might understand what you mean, and you might be like agnostic on whether there's a central point. I guess I might not even be sure that there's a proposition because I'm not really sure what one of the terms is supposed to mean.
You're not sure what a proposition is?
No, I'm saying I'm not sure that what you're saying is even a proposition because I'm not clear on one of the terms there.
You're not sure if what I'm saying is a proposition. Which part did I say that you think is not a proposition? I'm sorry, I'm confused.
I didn't say I hold the view it's not a proposition. I'm just saying I'm not totally sure because there's a term you're using that I'm not clear on.
You're not clear on what like a central thesis idea or central point of an argument is? You don't know what that means?
No, because I mean you've used like so. I mean, if by that you just mean the goal somebody has in mind when using something, I would understand you. But you've made it clear that that's not what you mean, and now you're kind of losing me.
Yeah. So sometimes there's going to be terms that aren't like rigidly defined. If that's a problem in your view, I don't know how to help you.
No, I don't have an issue with vagueness. I'm just saying. But like the concept is too vague to be useful for me.
Well, it might not be useful for you, but what I'm saying is, all I'm saying here is that it doesn't seem like there is a central point being made. If there is one, I don't know what it is.
I don't know how
And
repeating the term is helpful.
If you could just stop interrupting. I try not to interrupt you. I try to be charitable. Give me the same courtesy. So I'm saying I don't know what the central point is. If you don't know what a central point is, you're not going to be very helpful for the discussion, right? Like if you just genuinely have no clue what I mean when I say what's the central point being made by this pseudo argument. It's not a real argument or dialogue flirtery, whatever you want to call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what a central point is, and I'm asking, hey, there doesn't seem to be a point that is making. What is the central idea? What's the thing that this is supposed to either persuade me to or convince me of? What's it supposed to be doing? Why am I doing it? If you don't know either, then I guess we agree. I don't know what it is either, right? And that's kind of problematic.
No, that's actually just a confusion, though. So there's two things. So what you're saying is that take the proposition. NTT has a central point. You're agnostic on that proposition. I'm not even sure what that means yet. So to say that if I don't know what the term means, I'm agreeing with you is false, because it's not like I'm taking some stance on the proposition. I'm not sure what the claim is yet. And we can easily look, we can just take a few minutes to unravel what a central point means. Because to be clear, what I'm not saying is that like I'm totally unclear on what anyone ever means when they say central point. I'm just saying I'm unclear what you mean. Right, because there are cases where people use this language that I totally understand what they're saying, but you just seem to be using this talk in some weird way that I'm not quite getting.
Okay, well, I'm probably using it roughly how everyone else is meaning it. I might not have like a rigid definition. If that's a critique of not having a rigid definition of a term, I don't see a problem with that.
No, that's not the critique. Look, I've already said, I'm fine in general. I'm fine with vagueness in general. I think you can apply vagueness to like a whole large set of our concepts. The point is that I just don't know. Like, it's not precise to the degree I even know what you're saying. Like, it can be vague to some degree, but it's just not precise enough to the degree that I don't really know what's being said.
Okay,
but you did mention something else.
I probably mean it roughly how other people mean it. So does that help you at all? Do you understand what a central point would be? And if you do at that point, like if you kind of know what most people mean when they say, "Hey, what's the central point of this argument?" Like, what's the thing it's conveying to me, or the information it's supposed to be giving me, or maybe the proposition it's supposed to be convincing me.
Yeah, I would just understand
to that effect. I would just understand that NTT has one. Does it?
Well, okay. So if you're talking about how I understand, if you're talking about how I understand, like the ordinary usage should be, I would just take it to be the goal the kind of either the original appropriator had for the dialect flow or the argument, or the goal someone else has, like when they're kind of making use of it. If we talk about the central point of like some argument in philosophy, we might think of what the person who originally wrote that argument, what their main goal for it was, or what their main purpose for doing such was.
Yeah,
but I've already asked you, is that what you mean? And you said no. You said no earlier. Are you saying that is what you mean?
Not necessarily, right? I said not necessarily, because there can be vagueness to it. So like I said, I use Wittgenstein's argument in a unique way. So there's sometimes going to be usages that are different. But for the sake of this, sure. Like, what's the central point being made by AY? Let's go.
Okay,
with that. Does AY have a central point? Okay,
just to be clear, we're signing off for this case. We're signing off on how I understood the term.
I'm trying my best to. If I find that there's some weirdness to it, sure, I'll my backtrack here. But
so I would.
Can you say the definition rigidly again for me? The rigid definition.
Yeah, it was. So there's two definitions. The definition was either the goal or the purpose the original appropriator of the argument or of the tool or the dialogue flow had when constructing it or had for its use, or the goal an individual or person has when making use of an argument or a dialogue flow or whatever.
I take issue with the term purpose, and the reason I do is I'm looking for a proposition. So it's going to be the proposition they're trying to persuade you toward. It's going to be propositional. It's not going to be like to question myself. That's not really a proposition. That doesn't really do anything, right? A thrust is going to be a proposition. So it's going to be the proposition they intended to persuade you towards.
Okay, so you're just wait. It just seems like you just gave a definition there. I can go with that. So you said all it is a proposition that somebody making use of the tool is trying to persuade you. Is that all it is?
Yeah. So it's okay. I guess that's probably an easy way of putting it. Sure.
Oh yeah. That's all. That's all I was looking for. Yeah. Okay, I understand what you're so. So thrust is the proposition that some person is trying to convince you of when they make use of an argument or dialogue flow or tool or whatever. Fine. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Then the critique, when you say so for NTT to have a thrust, all that would have to be required is that for at least one person who has ever made use of NTT, one person had some goal of trying to convince somebody of some proposition.
And that proposition needs to be it's gonna have to be symmetrical with what the methodology is, right? So the method that you're using, right? So like say for instance, if I'm trying to convince you God does not exist, this is the proposition I'm trying to convince you of. I provide an argumentation, right? Argumentation can succeed in doing this, right? So the method needs to match the thrust. So what's the thrust that the dialectic method of NTT matches?
Wait, I don't know what you're talking about. The dialectic method. The definition I heard from you a minute ago was the thrust just is the proposition somebody's trying to persuade you of when making use of the tool or the argument. That was the definition I heard. It seems like you're giving a different one now. Okay.
No, I didn't give a different.
Yeah,
I didn't give you a different.
Now
different
the question
definition.
is,
what I said, if you could just let me finish talking too, because I keep letting you talk, but I think that maybe you're not very good at listening. That's going to get concerning. So what I said was that the thrust, even if you get a thrust, right, merely having a thrust is not going to be enough, right? I don't know what thrust NTT has, right? In most conditions, I don't know what it is, but the reason I don't know is because the method doesn't seem to match any given thrust. So like now we need to see if you have a thrust. Let's see with whether or not the method actually matches the thrust.
Are you sticking with
give me a thrust? If you can give me the thrust you think that the method would match for and would work to get to, give it to me and let's see whether or not it does. And I'll do my best. I don't have a whole lot of time. I've got maybe 10
Are you sticking with the first definition of thrust, or are you giving a different definition now?
Sure, we can just start. Let's just do AY's. What is AY's thrust?
Are you sticking with the definition you gave earlier, or are you giving a new definition?
I just said yes, and I said let's go with just AY's thrust since you wanted to.
Well, I mean, now before we go,
I just said stop over talking. I get it that you want to talk.
I don't know why you asked me.
Chill.
I don't know why you asked me a question.
I'm mid-sentence because I'm mid-sentence. I'm mid-sentence, man, and it's very distracting to my train of thought.
Please just get out the sentence you want.
Questions. I prefer not to have debate scenarios because debaters tend to do what you're doing. You're interrupting because it disrupts my thought.
Well, this is just meta. I don't know why you're... But okay.
Yeah. It's getting meta because you're getting frustrating. Can you stop over talking? Do you agree to that?
I mean, yeah, you can get your rambles fine. Whatever. Just go ahead.
Thank you. Now, just continue. Where were we? I said my point was, what's AY's thrust? There we go.
Okay. Now, instead of moving on to that, I'm going to go to the first critique, and then we're going to keep going in order. Okay, so the first critique, before getting to AY's thrust, was that NTT has no thrust. And thrust, if we're using the previous definition... that you're not convinced that NTT has a thrust. I'd rather say it that way, right?
That's fine.
Okay, yeah, now to be clear, now my clarifying question there was, is all that sufficient, given all on your previous definition, all it seemed that seems sufficient for... entity to have a thrust would just be one person ever having used the tool with the goal of convincing somebody of some proposition. All right, so if that was true, would it then become true that NTT has a thrust on your view?
In that instance, sure, NTT has a thrust, right? But I don't think it's going to be a thrust that the method will succeed at.
Okay, so and to be clear, you take the view that you're not convinced that anyone ever has used NTT with the goal of trying to convince somebody of some proposition?
I think they might have intended to, but they would have failed at it because I don't think it's actually persuasive to anything.
Okay, so now if they intended to, then that's just conceding that NTT has a thrust in that instance.
In that instance, sure, I'll concede that.
Okay,
that's fine.
So you're not agnostic. So you're actually not agnostic. You do believe there are cases where it does have a thrust.
There might be instances where people attempt to make it have a thrust.
No. Now you're getting lost. Look, on your definition of thrust, all that's required is somebody having a goal to persuade somebody of some proposition. You said what they're trying to. You never said that they had to succeed or not.
No. Did you hear the part where I said the thrust needs to match the method, man? Did you hear that?
Wait, no. Now you're doing something else. We're just talking about the definition of thrust. I don't know why
if you could try to follow along. So what I said was when I'm saying like there's going to be a thrust, sure, there's going to be like an intended proposition that they're trying to convince you of, but I don't think it's going to be one that NTT is going to match, right? So like say for instance, you're trying to convince me of the proposition that ethical veganism is the best position, something like that, right? Is NTT going to be able to support this thrust?
Okay, so to be clear,
it's not NTT's thrust.
Okay, wait, hold on. Wait, so to be clear, we're agreeing, like, are you saying that, are you giving a different definition, or are you sticking to the previous definition that didn't require success or failure?
I added a condition to it, sure. You can go with that if you want. So
we're giving a new definition now, or?
I'm fine with
So
that. Sure, we can give a new definition if that helps you.
Okay, so and we agree that on the previous definition, there would be a thrust in some cases, and now you're just giving a new definition, right?
You cut out for me. Anybody else?
So okay, yeah. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm saying we agree that on the previous definition you gave, there would be a thrust in cases, but now you're giving a different definition.
Yeah, so when I say that NTT doesn't have a thrust, I think probably what I'm trying to get at is that there's not going to be some specific proposition that NTT as a method is going to manage to like uphold.
Right? You didn't actually answer there.
Well, I did. I said I'm changing the definition. I said that about 3 times now.
Yeah, but no, that wasn't the question. The question was, you agree that on the previous definition, so on the first definition where the definition strictly is the proposition somebody has a goal to convince someone or whatever with the tool, you agreed on that definition, there would be a thrust in certain cases. However, you're just giving on it, you're giving a different definition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Okay, and now just so we're clear on the new definition. The new definition is a thrust is the proposition somebody intends to convince another person of with the tool, and it's required that like they succeed in convincing that person.
No, not that they succeed in convincing them. That actually the tool or method could, at least in principle, succeed at like supporting the thrust, right? So, for instance, an argument I gave and I think I actually said this definition about 3 times. If I remember in our text discussion, I said several times that when I say a thrust, I said that. I actually did say the portion where it has to be a method that will actually support the thrust. So, let's say, for instance, I'm trying to convince you that God exists, and I give it and I provide a method that in principle wouldn't support that thrust, right? So like I pray for you, like maybe God could convince you, but my prayer isn't going to in principle convince you, right?
Wait, hold up, what is it like? So now we need to get clear on what you mean by support, because presumably by convincing here, are we just talking about like, let's say like whatever, when the tool is kind of relayed to somebody, like something that's roughly explained by the relaying of that tool explains why they changed their view. Is that what we mean by convince here, or are we meaning something different by convince? Because presumably like somebody could use the dialogue and some reflection that was triggered by the dialogue could explain why someone changed their view.
Yeah,
would that be sufficient for convincing?
We're talking about some rational enterprise here. We're not just talking about merely just my attitude state changed and and it happened to change as a result of that, right? So for instance, it could happen substantially be the case that you start running NTT on me. Let me give you an example to work with here. Let's say you start running NTT on me, and I realize that from my view as a non-vegan, I can't seem to name the trait, right? I can't do it. And so because of that, I'm persuaded to become a vegan, right? Now, I might not be rationally have done so. Right, like so, there's going to be a rational portion to this. So, like, I could irrationally, accidentally be persuaded by something in the same way that presuppositional apologetics could persuade me of Christianity. Right? It's the goal of precept, the thrust of it is that without God you can't have knowledge. But then the methodology for precept doesn't actually match the thrust in principle. Like you really wouldn't be able to it shouldn't rationally persuade me.
Wait a second. I thought on the new definition of trust, it's just required that hold up. Now it seems like you're saying. Now it just seems like you're saying you're not adding that requirement anymore.
No, I said I am. So it needs to in principle rationally be able to do that. So like for instance,
let's actually try writing this down. Let me write this down. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just not sure if you're actually engaging with the point or just kind of like stalling. And so like the point goes like this. So if I'm running let's say I'm running presuppositional apologetics on you, and I go, okay, I want to convince you that without God you cannot have knowledge, right? That's the thrust. Without God you can't have knowledge. That's the thrust of presuppositional apologetics. That's what they're trying to convince you of. But then when you analyze the methodology that they give you, right? The method is that I'm gonna attack your specific worldview, right? You might irrationally be persuaded that God exists because you couldn't seem to make this work. You're like, oh, I couldn't do it. I didn't know how to overcome this, and so I'm now persuaded God exists, right? But you're not actually rationally persuaded of it because the methodology doesn't in principle match the thrust.
Okay, so I think I'm almost we know the thrust is the first condition is the proposition somebody has the goal of persuading somebody with using a given tool, and then there's another condition where something like where the person can in principle be persuaded or the tool or whatever. How do you lay out that second condition?
how do I say again? You just talked really fast at the end.
Yeah, I'm saying there's some second condition that's something like where the person can, in principle, be persuaded with this or something. How are you kind of laying that out? Just so I can write it down.
Not just it's going to be that they are going to be like if someone could be if it's a rational method to do so. Like I don't know, like your cognitive states, you might be convinced of silly things by weird directions. Like for instance, I might poke you on the shoulder and that convinces you somehow that there's gold on the other side of the moon. Right? That's not a rational that's not going to be rational, right? So the method needs to be in principle supporting the thrust. That's the whole point.
Okay, so we have two. Okay, I can get you now. So the first one is thrust is the proposition somebody has the goal of persuading somebody of with the tool, where we're using or making use of that tool is a rational method of persuading the person, right?
Yeah, it's going to need to be a rational method. Like, well, okay, and I mean, the method needs to rationally support the thrust is the point.
Okay, and now the part that's like getting me is like I don't really know what rational method is supposed to mean here. That's like weird language there. So, like, how are you defining a rational method here?
Well, so like for instance, I gave the example of an irrational method, but like let's say for instance I accept all the premises of the problem of evil, right? If I accept all the premises and I reject the conclusion, am I rational?
I mean, it just depends how you're defining rational, which is what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to define what a rational method is.
I don't know that there's a good way to define that, to be honest. I'm not really sure. I think we both the thing is that I just feel like you're kind of stalling. Like, are you actually interested in
I can say, look, all these mind reading stuff, I can say the same thing to you. I don't know why you're...
That's fine. You can say that. I think that probably, like, I'm not necessarily interested in persuading you right now, right? I'm just trying to talk about NTT. But if you're just going to go, well, what does rational mean? Oh, well,
no, rational method, to be clear. Like, I can give you semantics for how I use the term rational. Like, I can give you semantics for that. For example, somebody's rational if and only if, like, they have some goal and they're like acting in ways that, will sort of satisfy their goal. I mean, that's how I use the term rational. But to be clear, when you say rational method...
How did you define it again?
Yeah, so generally, for the word rational, generally I use that term in a way where it's like somebody is rational if and only if they have some goal and their actions are kind of like consistent with whatever they're like, or their actions are kind of, they're acting in ways that are conducive towards their goal or something like that.
I think that's a terrible definition. Like for obvious reasons, like it's like, okay, well, if I have the goal of not believing in God and by somehow like, not accepting the problem of evil, I end up still believing in God. It's like, okay, that's rational?
Yeah, that's rational under how I use the term. So that's why I'm asking you, when you say rational method, to be clear, rational method, not just rational, like how are you defining a rational method here?
Like I said, I don't have a formal definition there, and I'm not sure that I don't know how I would define it like that. Like I think that probably the thing is that I think sometimes we're asked for definitions. And I usually have one like offhand. I don't know if you've ever talked to me before. Usually, I'm pretty quick to throw out like specific general definitions or whatever. In this instance, I think we both know what a rational method is. Like it's going to be something like where actually in principle. Okay, well if you don't, then I don't know why you're even engaging in this because presumably you think
because you're giving a critique and I want to know what the critique is.
Just a second. Like I said, so presumably in this moment, this dialogue right here is a rational method of determining whether or not my critique is like fallacious or something, right? So do you think?
Again, I don't know what you mean by rational method, man.
Okay, so you don't know whether or not what we're doing right now is a rational method to go anywhere?
I don't. When you use the term rational method, I don't know what you mean.
I think you're just bullshitting, to be honest.
I don't know why. Like, look, I've told you time and time again that the whole mind reading thing is not productive in any way, but you feel the need to keep doing it.
I'm not concerned about it. I don't care whether or not you think it's productive. The thing is that I think you're. It just seems like you're kind of stalling, and we can go through an infinite set of definitions, and I don't know that we're going to get anywhere with it. So. I do think I'm making a point here. I don't have a lot of time, and I'm trying to get to the meat and potatoes of this discussion.
Okay. Yeah. Look. Just imagine. Like I can say this. I can just say, look. Every time you say that, I do know what you're saying. I could just say that you're not making sense, or that that you're being incoherent or something. Like I don't think that's going to be useful. But to be clear, like I'm happy to like end it here if you're just saying that you don't have like any sort of account of. Like what counts as a rational method, because when you ask me stuff like, is this conversation a rational method? Obviously I'm not going to be able to answer that because I don't know what you mean by rational method. And so that just won't be a very good strategy to convey what you mean there.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know what central points are, you don't know what rational methods are, I'm going like, well, why are you engaging in what you think is a dialectic? The reason I'm engaging in this dialectic is because I assume that this is going to be a rational method for us to be able to adjudicate our differences.
I can tell you the reason
I don't know the strict definition of what rational method means, but I don't think that that's super relevant.
Well, I can answer that question. The reason I'm engaging in this is because I have a goal where you seem to be presenting critiques of NTT, and I had a goal of understanding what the critiques are, potentially responding to them. So that's why I'm engaging in this. Now, look, I forgot where else you said.
Do you think this is a rational method to get there?
Do you think I'm able to answer that when I don't know what you mean by rational method?
I think that most people are going to go, yeah, they think that this is probably a rational method to get there, even if we can't give a formal.
I don't know about that empirical claim. I don't know why I'd accept that either. This is why I call people dishonest in these kind of chats, and I'm not trying to be rude because I think you're a nice guy for the most part. Like you were a little bit like you come on a little strong and everything, but I think that when I get into these conversations with you guys, it just strikes me as dishonest. Like I get it that you want formal definitions. I don't always have all of them. I'm not perfect. I'm not like a machine, believe it or not. But I generally know what a rational method is, and I'm just trying to get at, look, if you have a thrust, you need to have some kind of a methodology that matches and supports that thrust, right? That's all I'm getting at here. Do you think that NTT has a thrust that it will actually support, not necessarily convince me successfully, but that it can in principle support? If thrust, one of the conditions there involves rational method, then I'm still not clear on what a thrust is. And I remember what I wanted to respond to earlier. You were saying, like, I don't know what the central point is. Well, at this point, I'm partially clear because there's one condition where I straightforwardly understand. It's that second condition requiring like the tool being a rational method. That's not what I'm understanding. But if you're saying like you just don't want to, like, which is fair. Like, you don't. I'm not saying you have to, but if you just don't want to like give an account, like I'm fine with just sending it here if you want to. I mean, I don't know.
I don't think we're going to get anywhere if you're just pretending to not know something. Like if I say, for
remember
instance,
what we said about the mind reading. Remember?
Yeah, I remember what I said about it though. Like what I said. Did you?
Do you think if I just said that you're pretending to say something meaningful? Do you think if I said that that's like adding anything to our conversation?
Did you hear what I said?
Like after I said it wasn't productive.
Yeah, what I said after that. Do you remember what I said?
Yeah, you said you didn't care that it was whether I think it's productive or not, right?
Yeah, I don't really care. But did you hear why?
I'm not sure I picked out exactly why.
So I said my frustration is that these kind of dialogues sometimes come across as a little dishonest. Like I'm not trying to be rude to you. I'm going like, okay, look, if you have a reason to think, it's going to give rational methods are going to be things like reason givingness. Maybe I can go into it. I don't know. I don't know that there's like a formal strict definition that I can give. But I can tell you one thing. If I take like the presuppositional methodology, it's not going to in principle convince me, or it shouldn't in principle convince me that God exists, right? The examination of my view does nothing to persuade me, or it shouldn't rationally. If I'm a rational agent and I see it, I shouldn't be persuaded that God exists simply because I'm unsuccessful at supporting my atheistic view, right? So that's what I mean. So like we need a thrust. So it's going to be a proposition, and that proposition is going to be in principle supported by the method that AY is presenting when it comes to NTT. Do you think there is a thrust that this will successfully? To be clear,
the in principle talk, that's different from the conditions. The two conditions I have right now is the proposition somebody has the goal of persuading somebody with, where the tool, so with some tool, where using that tool is a quote unquote rational method of persuading the person. And right now we're just, I don't really know what rational method means. And I'm saying if you aren't willing to kind of like give an account of that term, like I don't really have anything else to say here. But if you are willing to, I'm happy to continue that.
How about we do this? Let's go through it. Because I can give you whether or not I think it's a rational method, and if you will give me the thrust you think it can support, and then I'm going to test against that thrust. Let's just go that direction. Let's go that direction.
I genuinely don't know if you're not following me, Tart. Look.
Well,
presumably by thrust, you just mean something where one of the conditions contains rational method. Look, Tart, I'm not going to be able to give you a thrust if I'm not clear on what thrust means. I don't know if you're...
How about you give me what you think might be the central point that someone might make, and then we can test it against NTT.
By central point, you just mean thrust. That's just not tracking the conversation.
Well, that's what I said just now.
If I'm not clear on what a thrust is, then how am I supposed to supply that to you?
Well, I mean, if you're still not clear on what a thrust is, I'm not sure that I can help you. But presumably,
I've given
you
you
agree
the
with me,
specific
though,
thing
right?
that would help me, but you just said I'm not. I'm not even clear if you're. So to be clear, the
I
specific
feel
thing
like
that would
I'm
help
answering
me.
a lot of questions, and
Okay.
you're not answering any.
Okay, one second. Just to be clear, the specific thing right now that would progress is if you had an account of what a rational method is, and like I'm fine.
Well,
Look, I'm fine.
how
Like
about we go down my way and let's see if we can be more productive? So I
well,
asked a
I'm happy
question.
to go down
Can you
something else. But to be
provide?
clear, are you
Can
going
you
to give an
provide?
account of
Can you
what a rational
provide?
method is?
Dude, I think you're just dodging. Can you provide what? Can you provide what thing is it that that NTT is supposed to persuade me of? And then I'll see. Let's test and see whether or not it actually can persuade me of that, or it's
Well,
you rationally speaking.
I'm happy to answer that question, but before we do that,
Well, how
are
about
we
we
now
just
saying?
answer that question? Because I've
Well,
answered a fuckload
I
of
didn't get a clear
questions.
answer to my last question. Are we not? Are you saying that you?
How about we
Are you
be
saying?
more productive?
Are you saying that you won't give an account of what a rational method is? Is that what you're
I don't
saying?
know. I said I don't know how to several times. I was like, I don't
Okay,
really
fine.
know
Okay,
how
you can't.
to.
Okay, fine.
I don't
Okay,
really know
that's fine.
how
Yeah.
to.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Now, okay, to answer your
Whenever
question,
you
and
whenever you say rational method, do you just mean something like an appeal to someone's rational faculties or their ability to reason?
Yes, I mean it's gonna be something in that range. Like it's gonna be if I'm a rational agent
So
and
I mean, I can
this
probably
method is supposed to persuade me of something, right? And it's gonna be like,
I can
well, oh, go ahead, Nibu.
I
Sorry.
can probably give some examples, right? So you could tell someone, you shouldn't eat a bunch of candy, and then you inform them why it's going to damage their health, all of this stuff, right? So you're appealing to like desires that they have and their ability to reason rationally. Whereas, like, if you told someone not to eat candy and they say why, and you say because I'll beat you up or something like that, that's not an appeal to their rational faculties, right? So it's not
That's a
like
fair way of
what he's
putting it.
calling
Sure.
a rational method. Yeah.
wait, but
Yeah.
under well, I mean, I think that has problems because if the idea is like just appealing to desires, presumably the person has a desire not to get beat up, right? So that's not good.
Yeah, but it's not just an appeal to their desires, right? It's an appeal to their ability to reason. I think that there's like literature, right, on manipulation that deals with this specifically. So, like, cases of manipulations, what they do is they circumvent our abilities to reason, right? So, manipulative cases like appeal to, not our rational faculties. Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, so like, okay, so there are things you're saying that I'm not totally clear on, but can we pick this up after I get back from my calculus recitation? It'll take like 50 minutes, and then we'll pick this up
That's
after.
fine.
Cause,
I will.
yeah.
I will ask that in the future, if you could, please. I have severe anxiety disorder. You can win if you're just trying to win a debate. You can beat me easy. All you got to do, keep interrupting my flow of thought, and you will completely demolish me. I'm a loser.
What?
I can't even think straight when you do that. It was making
Not
me very
even
anxious.
debating.
That's why
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's why I kept saying, "Hey, stop interrupting," because even if you're interrupting, what you're doing is you're cutting off my train of thought, and it causes my anxiety to skyrocket, and you can hear my speech drops. I also can't focus. So if you're just wanting to win, do that all day. You'll win. But if you actually want to understand, you got to stop interrupting. Can we make that a deal?
Okay. I mean, it's just that sometimes I want to steer so sometimes you're. Well, I prefer like steering the conversation a certain way, and sometimes you kind of go off that track. But fine. I have to literally go to calc right now.
Go ahead,
I'll
man.
do when I come back, I'll just come again. We'll just pick it up because I think Nebu's taking the view that he has an account of what a rational method is. I think so. I can hear that.
Well, I mean, he was on point with what I'm trying to say, but we can pick it up later if you want.
Yeah, you've got to go, right? Like, I've never explicitly heard the term rational method, right? But I have heard phrases like appeals to rational faculties or abilities to reason, right? So I would assume, like, he's thinking that, imagine that someone presents you with NTT, like maybe the conclusion of the argument would be something like, or the belief you should walk away with is like, I'm not justified in eating animals because there's like no clear demarcation between like the morally acceptable cases and not, which honestly seems fine. I'm not really sure why that's not
talk about it, but. Nebu, do you know what a thrust is? Because I'm not sure why this seems to be like if I say the thrust of an argument.
Well, I think if imagine a proposition as something like I really love you. You might want to give like a matching like flow and carrying thrust.
I lost you there at the end.
Organizations that are like, like that are making mistakes that I've already talked about before. So it could be true that when most people hear the term central point, they're clear on what it means. And I've already said, I'm not making a claim that I have no idea what central point means when anybody uses the term. I've said this multiple times, in fact. I said, I don't know what your account is. Okay, that's what I said.
Sure.
Right, so that could be true, but that's not like that's just not incompatible with anything I've said or asserted.
Sure, maybe I don't have a formal definition and strict sense of what a central point is. Do you? I mean, I don't know how else to convey what a central
Okay,
point is.
that's
But
fine.
if you just have no clue what it is, I think you're being dishonest. I'll leave it up to
Okay.
the audience though, because I think we were at the same stopping point before.
Yeah, and I've already clarified that's
just
about your account, to be clear. I've already clarified that. And another thing is like I would
well,
say
I would like to continue. I'd also like to be able to not be interrupted. I do know that I
well,
interrupted
you're
you a few
kind of
times. I wasn't trying to.
misrepresenting. Well, you're just misrepresenting me, but okay.
Well, what I'm saying is that just because somebody can't give you a formal definition of something, it's not really a reason for you to just completely not deal with the point being made.
I'm not sure
I
what
can't
the
give
point
you.
is.
Well, that's the question. I'm not sure what the fucking point is either. What's the point of NTT? What is it doing?
No, no, oh my
What's it
gosh.
doing?
No, when I said I'm not sure what the point is, I'm saying, of course, if I'm not clear on if you're making a claim that makes use of some concept and the concept isn't clear, then I won't be clear on what the claim is either. So that's another thing. Yeah, but look, fine. If we won't, yeah, I think it sounds like, we'd just be rehashing things said earlier. So, like, do you have any more critiques, or is this like the only critique you had?
Well, I don't even know if you understood the critique that I levied. Do you?
No,
Can
I'm
you
not.
maybe
Yeah, I'm
try
not
to?
saying I don't. Yeah, I agree. I didn't understand it, but I'm saying, do you have
Yeah,
any
no, no,
more that
no.
I might?
What I'm saying though is even in my own words, like all you seem to focus on is the single word, which is central point or thrust. Do you
Well,
understand
that's
why
is
that's
very
problematic and why that's a critique?
I don't. If you're asking, if that's just to say, do I understand why your critique is an issue? I don't even understand what the critique is. So no, like it'll just follow. If
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
understand what the critique is, I won't understand how it's an issue, of course. But like, look, all I'm asking is, do you have any more critiques? Maybe we can talk
I
about
don't
some
think that.
other
I think
issues.
you're just trying to talk about literally anything other than the thing that I'm trying to talk about. Like
Because
you're like, let's
what do you
talk
mean?
about this. Let's
We've
go
been
over
going
here.
back,
How
we've
about
been
we
going
just
back and forth, and we're not
dude,
making any
Mason,
progress. I don't understand what's being said.
Mason,
You've already said you won't convey the concept. Why would we keep talking
Mason,
about the same thing?
Mason. You keep interrupting me, and I told you
Yeah,
this
but
is really frustrating for me.
I agree.
Can you try to stop talking when I'm talking? I'll do the same for you,
Um,
please.
or just go ahead.
So it seems like you're just going, okay, well let's go, let's run over here. What is a central what's a central point? Okay, well I start giving you the conditions for a central point and you just keep going ad infinitum. And then I go, okay, do you have anything that even comes close to this that NTT attempts to convey to me? If so, what the fuck is it? And you go, I don't know. And I go, okay, cool. So when your literature teacher asks you, hey, can you give me a central point? Are you going to go down that same route? Just be honest. Yes or
All
no.
right, I've answered this. I've responded to this multiple times. At this point, I'm just not going to answer it anymore.
Okay, it's a yes or no question. The answer is obviously no, right? You wouldn't do that with your
And look, okay, I'll just leave it. Everybody in this VC, if you ask any of them how I've dealt with this specific objection you're raising up, everybody will be able to reproduce. Well, maybe Marco just joined, but everyone else will be able to reproduce what I said earlier. So if you're still saying this at this point, I don't know what to tell you. So do you have any other critiques there?
That's fine. If you just don't know what a central point is, maybe this is just beyond you here. I don't know what else to tell you, man.
And remember, to be clear, when I say I don't know what it means, I'm talking about your specific account.
I don't see why I need to go down the infinite rabbit hole of definitions for you to be able to give me what the fuck the point is NTT is trying to make.
And to be clear, I never made any claim about you having to go down an infinite rabbit hole. But now, just to pigeonhole this, do you have any other critiques you want to talk about? Is this all there was?
This is the only one I really want to talk about, but we never got to it because you seem to be derailing.
Okay, if this is the only thing, then yeah, I don't think this will go. I mean, yeah, I just don't understand what the critique is. If you have some other critique you want to discuss, that maybe we might be able to make progress on that one. But like, if you're just saying you don't really want to discuss about it anymore, like that's fine. Like,
Well, no, I'd love to keep talking about it, but what I want to get out of this is just that look, there's this general idea of what a central point is, what something is attempting to convey to me or to you, something it's trying to persuade me of. There's going to be like a proposition. It's going to be like ethical veganism is the only one that can account for the moral asymmetry of two beings.
That wasn't
your something that obviously that wouldn't be the one that it's actually going to give, but like it's if I give you like a general idea and you go, okay, well let's analyze this, and I was like, okay, well I'll humor him, sure, I'll go down this rabbit hole.
That wasn't the account of central point you gave. You're just giving a different account now.
How am I giving a different account? I said it several times earlier.
No, I've written your account has two conditions. Remember, one, the proposition somebody has the goal of persuading somebody with the tool, and two, and that's given. And the other condition where the tool being used is a quote unquote rational method of persuading the person of that proposition. And remember, and of course, I'm not clear on what rational method means there, but the thing is that right now you're just giving different accounts. I'm saying the account I'm unclear on is the one I just mentioned. That's just not fair. Like, it's not fair to just keep giving different accounts. And
I thought I just gave the same. I didn't give those two conditions. I said it's just the one that everyone else usually means, and I think that's usually what people mean.
No, but the account you just gave, it wasn't exactly. But you just roughly what you did was you just gave the first condition of your account. But your account has two conditions, so like that's just dishonest. You're just giving different accounts and acting as if like I'm being this like absurd guy who doesn't understand things. But the issue is that you're just changing what you said earlier, and that's just not fair to do.
I don't think I'm changing anything. What exactly am I changing?
There were two conditions, and on the account you just mentioned, you only said one of them. And I already granted you, I understand that first condition. So obviously it's not going to be like good faith to say, well, everyone knows what a central point is and define it listing only the first condition. I already said I understood when your account has two conditions. That's just not.
Do you want to just remove the second condition then? Would that help us move the conversation forward at all?
You can, if you want to remove it, that's fine. Like, it's up to you. It's your definition.
Well, but do you understand a thrust if it's that first one?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Okay, cool. So what's the thrust do you think that NTT is making under the
well, under like saying it's the goal somebody has, like that could be different for different people. But I thought you already agreed, but you've already conceded that on the first, if we're just using the first condition, which was the very first, the first clear count that was given, I thought you already conceded that NTT will have a thrust in many cases under that condition.
Sure, but then my critique is going to be it's not going to be a successful thrust probably. So I'm curious though, because I do want to hear what you think the thrust is given by, say, for instance, AY.
Okay, I can give you like
by AY so that we can see whether or not it actually matches.
So if it's AY, if it's ask yourself, I would say like for him, like the goal he has is like he's trying to get people to, at least, I mean, this is a generalization. It could be different kids, but generally it seems like what he's trying to do is he's trying to get somebody to kind of reflect on their values concerning like the treatment between like animals and humans. And he also is trying to expose, like if somebody's view is like inconsistent, he's trying to expose that as well. So those are like two main.
Okay, so it is to reflect on your values a proposition.
I thought you were asking me what his goal was. What do you mean?
Well, the thrust you have it written
you're
down.
asking.
The proposition: someone has the goal of persuading me of using the tool.
Okay. I actually forgot about. Okay, I actually forgot about the proposition. Oh yeah. Okay. So, I've actually forgot about that condition. Yeah, if it's the proposition, somebody has the goal of persuading somebody of the tool. Yeah, I'm not even convinced that AY actually is trying to persuade anybody of a proposition.
Okay, wait a second. So, in at least AY's case, you agree then there's not a thrust.
No, I'm saying I'm not convinced that I'm not convinced that there is one. I wouldn't say
So
like
at least okay, cool. At minimum,
Yeah,
though,
yeah.
you're saying you agree because I don't know that he's making a thrust, and that's the whole point. Is that it should be pretty clear if this is trying to persuade me of something. It should be very clear of what it's trying to persuade me to. So it doesn't seem like
Okay,
there's
yeah.
anything that he's trying to persuade me to.
Yeah, it sounds like we just, I don't know if we agree. It sounds like, yeah, we both have the same view where like we're both not convinced that at least when AY uses NTT, I think we're both not convinced that there's some proposition he's trying to persuade somebody of.
Cool.
I think, yeah, so I think we
now
disagree
when
there.
when I say that I find it at least in his instance, I find it to be like an unpersuasive thing. Like it's not persuasive because there's nothing he's persuading me to. Would you
Wait, what do
agree
you,
that would follow
when
from
you
it?
say when you say it's unpersuasive, are you saying it doesn't persuade people?
No, that it's not persuasive to anything, and so it's by definition not going to be persuasive, right?
No,
It's
I'm
not
not
trying to
clear.
persuade.
I'm not clear. Like, because for example, it could be the case that he doesn't have, like, it could just be the case that he doesn't have some proposition in mind that he's trying to persuade someone of. Nevertheless, it could still be persuasive to people of some
Well,
proposition.
remember we talked about this earlier, though. So I said happenstantial persuasions are not
No,
necessarily something that.
I'm just saying, like, you need to
that's not what
clarify
we're
what you
talking
mean by
about.
persuasive. I'm just saying you need to clarify what you mean by persuasive here.
Well,
Like, if you're
what I
saying
mean is that there's a goal in mind, there's a proposition he's trying to persuade me to, and that his method is trying to get me there. Like
oh, okay,
there's if
gotcha, gotcha,
that's
gotcha.
I'm gonna say that this is unpersuasive because there's nothing it's really trying to persuade me to.
Okay,
and if it
yeah.
is, it's not clear what it is.
Yeah, now just to be clear, if by persuasive you mean that there's some proposition that Ask Yourself has in mind that he's trying to convince somebody of when he's using NTT, if that's what persuasive means, then I'm not convinced it's persuasive on that account specifically.
Cool. I find it unpersuasive by that measure. That's
Yeah,
why I say it's unpersuasive.
Yeah, of course. And all you mean by that is that it's not all you mean when you say, well, actually, to be clear, you don't want to say, like, even you don't want to say it's unpersuasive. What you want to say is that you're not convinced it is persuasive, right? I thought that's what you were saying earlier.
Well, in the same light, if I think that something, if I'm saying, hey, look, there doesn't really seem to be anything that it's persuade me to, and I can't seem to find anyone who can give me anything that it's supposed to persuade me to. Like everyone that I ask does this dodgy nonsense, and I just can't seem to nail down. Hey, does anybody know what the fuck this NTT thing is supposed to persuade me of? Because everyone, when someone says, hey, it's unpersuasive, it's like, well, what's it supposed to persuade me to, right? But I would go, yeah. If I say maps are unpersuasive, sure, it's unpersuasive because maps don't persuade me to things. Like,
wait,
sure.
are you saying?
But, like,
are you saying you're just defining? Are you just defining unpersuasive as the agnostic claim? So, for example, by unpersuasive, you just mean that you're not convinced that there's some. Is that all you're saying there? That you're just defining it as like not being convinced.
Just the negation of persuasive, so not persuasive.
No, I'm just saying, but like when you say it's not persuasive, is all you're saying that you're not convinced that there's a proposition that Asker AY has in mind that he's trying to persuade persuade somebody of?
All I'm saying is, like, if you have a goal, like some kind of a proposition, right? That's the thing that something's supposed to persuade you to.
Well, that was like a yes or no, actually.
If it doesn't have a goal, if it does, okay, well, maybe ask it again because I don't think it's.
Yeah, the question was
no, but
yeah, no, yeah. The question was, when you say it's not persuasive, is all you're saying that you're not convinced that there is a proposition Ask Yourself is trying to persuade people of?
That's a piece of it, but you're not getting the whole thing.
Okay, so that's one of the conditions.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
and
So
then what's the other condition?
Like, if I say something is like not persuasive, but it's like a map is not persuasive. Maps aren't supposed to persuade me of things, right? There's nothing unless, like, maybe I might have a goal of persuading you that the fastest route to to get to X location is this route, right? Then the map would be persuasive because I would be able to show you the map and I'd show you where we're going, right? But absent that, maps are unpersuasive. There's nothing to persuade me to or anything, like, right? And so when I say
I didn't seem to add anything earlier.
Can you say again?
I'm not sure. Well, I mean, sorry. We'll finish. You just finish what you were saying. I know.
I'm getting at that with absent that goal, it's going to be unpersuasive because it just means not persuasive. Where even if it's like a tool that's not, like, hammers are not persuasive. Like, sure, hammers are not persuasive.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you're saying
not persuasive just means that there is no goal to convince somebody of a proposition. But remember what you were saying earlier. You said that you don't want to make the claim that there is. You're just saying that you're just saying you're not convinced that there is one, right? So I'm saying if by not persuasive you just mean there is no proposition, then that's just like, I mean, technically that'd just be a contradiction.
I'm just saying that I don't see one, and until then, it's going to be unpersuasive, right? So, like, until there is a goal, a map can't be persuasive. So, if I don't know that there's a goal, it's like, okay, well, I go looking at this, going, it's not persuasive. Why? Because I don't see the goal.
No, I don't think you're getting this part. Just listen. So, earlier, you actually insisted on this a few different times. You said, I'm not claiming that there is no thrust. You're just saying you're not convinced there is one. But if not persuasive just means that there in fact is no proposition that he has in mind to persuade people, and you take the view that it's not persuasive, then that's actually just contradicting yourself. The contradiction would just be, it is the case that I take the view that there's no proposition in mind that AY has to persuade people of, and it's not the case that I take the view.
Well, I think you're confusing there not being one with me not knowing that there is one, right? So you said it correctly, but then you got the whole rest of it wrong. So essentially, if I say I don't know what the goal is, right? I can't seem to identify one. Every one that's ever been offered. So, like for instance, a lot of people will come into the debate rooms and they'll go, NTT seems to be wanting to say this, and they go, nuh-uh, right? And there seems to be this sort of nuh-uh about all of the things that we might be persuaded to. But me going, hey, I'm not clear on what it's supposed to be persuading to. By that definition, it's going to just not be persuasive. If nobody seems to know, I don't know, it's not going to be persuasive. If nobody knows what the point is, I don't know what the point is, you don't know what the point is, I don't know anyone who seems to know the point. Without it, what's it persuading me to? Because I need to know it, right? So I have to have that knowledge in order for it to be persuasive.
I don't think you're getting it. Do you take the view that, okay, now remember, remember for everyone in the video, we're talking about an amended definition of thrust, amended to one of the initial ones where we're only using the first condition, not the second one. Do you take the view that NTT has no thrust on the first condition?
I don't think that it does, and if it does, I'm not clear on what it is. So
that's not what I said. I said, do you take the view that do you take the view? Okay, you're saying you don't know, so you don't take the view that it has no thrust. You're just agnostic. Okay.
Yeah, because okay. So for instance,
okay, no, that's fine. No, that's fine. That's all. That's okay. Now, do you take the view that Sorry, do you take the view that NTT? Why are you
shushing me and telling me to stop? That's not cool.
Well, no, I'm just saying.
Remember, I told you
I'm just trying to go somewhere with this line of questioning, though. So that's why I was trying to get.
Well, maybe just engage with the dialogue and stop trying to to stop doing that.
Well, I'm just trying to show you how there might be an error here. I think there might be an error. So now, do you take the view that NTT is unpersuasive?
Yeah, I think it's unpersuasive.
Okay, and unpersuasive just means that there is no thrust, right?
That's not what I said. Remember, I said no.
Okay, that's what I was asking you earlier. So does unpersuasive just means that you're not convinced that there is a thrust?
No, without me knowing a thrust, it has to be
unconvinced means you don't know what the thrust is. Yeah. Unconvincing means unpersuasive. I should have used that.
Well, there's lots of ways something can be unpersuasive, so that's not exhaustive of the conditions. But that would be
by unpersuasive, you just mean that you don't know what the thrust is, right?
Yeah, without the thrust, I can't be. It's not even in principle capable of persuading me.
And to be clear, I actually asked this earlier, but I don't know why you. Okay, yeah, fine.
Maybe I missed the question.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so we don't disagree there. So.
Okay, cool. So you would agree on this view, NTT is going to be like unpersuasive.
Which is just to say that I don't know that there is some proposition that AY has. I don't know that when AY uses NTT, he generally has the goal to persuade somebody of some proposition. Yeah, of course I agree with that. Yeah, that's like trivial.
Cool. Awesome. That's all that I think anyone means by this, right? So the next step is to go, okay, cool. So we have that it's unpersuasive. So, and when I say that it's pointless, right? When I go, okay, cool. NTT just kind of seems pointless.
Does pointless just
it just means that there's not a central point.
Does pointless just mean unpersuasive?
No, pointless means without a point, not having a point. There doesn't seem to be a point.
Pointless is different from
or like me not believing that there's a point, particularly is the way I would convey it.
So pointless just mean does point just mean thrust?
Yeah, there's the central point. When I say it's pointless, it doesn't seem that, or at least it doesn't seem to have.
So
maybe there is one.
You're just
maybe there. just a second. Maybe there is a point, right? And just AY is terrible at conveying it. Maybe there is a point
Okay,
there, right?
Well, there's no need
Maybe
to.
he's just really, really bad at it. I don't know.
This is just like this isn't needed. Okay. Anyway, to be clear,
Well, it
by
is kind
pointless,
of.
you just mean by pointless, you just mean you don't know what the thrust is, right?
Yeah,
Where
he doesn't
thrust-
seem. He's at minimum. If he has a point,
Was
he's
the answer
failing
yes there?
to convey it.
Was the answer yes there?
Can you say the question again? Because I thought I
By
answered it.
pointless, you just mean that you don't know what the thrust is.
Yeah. So exactly. So without,
Okay,
I don't know the point. So it's pointless.
And when you say you don't know what thrust is, you obviously just mean that you don't know that there's some proposition. That you don't know that ask yourself has the goal to convince people of some proposition when using NTT. Yeah. So I don't even know why you said this. This is just the same thing as saying it's unpersuasive. You just used a different term. It means the same thing. What do you mean?
No,
By unpersuasive, you just meant that you don't know what the thrust is, and you said by pointless, you just meant you don't know what the thrust is.
No. Saying that it's pointless entails that it's unpersuasive.
I'm just saying the
Those two
definitions were
things.
the same. I'm just
No,
saying
they
the
weren't.
definitions of.
No, you weren't paying attention.
Okay, then what was the difference
closely.
between the two?
Listen closely. Something being pointless, not having a proposition it's trying to convince you of, means it's not going to be convincing because it's not convincing you of anything. That's an entailment.
Wait, but now you're saying something
identical
different.
to it. It just entails.
Now you're saying something different. Now you're saying that.
Wait, you think that I said something different than that? It entails
yes.
That?
Look, now you're Look, you keep switching between these two. You keep switching between you not knowing if there's some goal to convince somebody of a proposition, and there not being a goal to convince somebody of a proposition.
Yeah, there's a linguistic. I'm fucking up linguistically, sure, but what I'm talking about is that I don't know it, right? And
okay,
if I
then
don't
it's the
know
same
it,
definition. It's the same. The words mean the same thing.
That doesn't follow. So if I say X entails, if I say the Big Bang somehow entails that there is an end to time, is the Big Bang identical to the end of time?
That's not what I said. I didn't know. The answer is no, but that's not what I claimed. The reason I'm saying they mean the same thing is because you said by unpersuasive, you just mean you don't know the proposition. You don't know if AY has the goal of persuading somebody of some proposition with NTT. Then you said by pointless, you just mean you don't know if AY has the goal of persuading somebody of some proposition with NTT. So does
that's
just
not
mean
what
the
I
same
said.
Thing?
You didn't listen.
Gosh.
Listen more closely.
Give us the definition.
Listen very closely. Listen very closely because you're just not paying attention. Pointless is not having a thrust. Not having a thrust entails not being persuasive because there's nothing to persuade me to.
Hold on.
That doesn't mean those two things are identical. That just means one entails the other, and one is just identical to the thing, right? The one that's identical is which one? Which one did I say was identical? Just in questions.
I
want to make sure you're listening. Which one did I say?
You're saying pointless means not having a thrust, right?
Pointless just means not having a thrust. What's the next
one? Earlier I asked you, does pointless mean not having a thrust? You said no. Now you're saying yes.
No, I said the opposite one. Which one did I say?
Now if you're saying pointless means not having a thrust, then that's just the claim. But if you claim that NTT is pointless, but that's not what you want to say. Remember, what you want to say is that you're not convinced that you're not convinced that there's a thrust.
Again, a linguistic tick. A linguistic tick. I said that. Sorry about it.
So you keep getting upset with me. You're the one that just keeps confusing the language. I'm not making any errors here. Okay, you're the one being unclear of how you're using the terms.
Pay very close attention. I'll say it again, and I'll try to be as clear as would you stop interrupting me over and over again, please?
The issue here
one
is
at a time.
You've already admitted that you keep
starting talking.
So how is it my problem?
I keep starting talking. I'm trying to be clear. I'm trying to say, hey, let me restate it, and I'll try to be as clear.
But the issue,
I will try to be as clear as possible if you will shut the fuck up, dude.
You shut up. The point is, you said the issue.
I will try to clarify it for you
if you like that.
Okay, can you try for a second? I'm trying to be charitable. I'm always charitable, but I don't think you're being very charitable. Can you listen, please?
Okay, go ahead. Just give us the count of pointless, just to be clear.
So, pointless is me saying I don't know what the point is, so it doesn't seem pointful, right? So there's not a point that it's pointing to, right?
Okay.
Now that's going to entail that it is not persuasive because there's nothing to persuade me to. So once you grant that there doesn't seem to be a thrust that he is trying to convey, if he is trying to get one across, he's not very good at it. Like he's doing a poor job at minimum. But maybe there is a thrust. I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, I get it. There's no need to go in this.
Dude, shut up.
You just look.
Let me
Tart,
go
you're-
through the
I
whole
hate to
thing.
say it, but
Shut
you're just
up.
rambling at this point.
Okay,
already
well, I
got
think
the
you're being
point earlier.
dishonest, but I still let you talk.
Look, Tart. There's no need to go in this. Look. Okay, now to be
Dude,
clear.
shut up. Let me
Tart,
finish.
look,
Let me finish my
Tart,
point.
Does point
Let me
just
finish
mean
what I'm
thrust?
saying.
Does point mean
Questions.
thrust, Tarf?
Mason, can you shut up and let me finish what I was saying?
Well,
I told you to stop doing
that.
that. Mason, I've had to mute exactly one person in this VC in my entire time of being here, and it was a person who would not stop yelling at me.
Well, you're just
shut up and listen
rambling
to my
right
point?
now.
I don't care. You're being dishonest, but I let you talk, so let me talk too.
You're just dodging. You're just dodging.
Will you agree to let me talk, or are you not going to let me talk? Because if you're
I
not
going
going
to answer to my question.
Mason, shut up, dude.
Okay, just
shut
get your
up.
ramble out, and I'll ask you the same question.
Okay, so as I was saying, one entails the other. It doesn't mean they're identical. There, let's move forward. Fine, whatever. I've forgotten it because you keep fucking interrupting, and I told you I have fucking severe anxiety disorder, and you will not stop interrupting, and it's being frustrating. So stop doing it. Will you agree moving forward to stop doing that?
Yeah, sure.
Yes or no?
Is that it? Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, sure. Is that it? Are you done? Is that it?
Sure. Let's move forward. What's
so
next?
To be clear, the account of pointless was not. Sorry, the account was pointless was you not knowing what the point is. Okay. Does point just mean thrust?
Yeah, the point is the thrust.
Okay,
yeah.
Then the account of pointless is you not knowing what the thrust is. That was the same account of unpersuasive.
No, unpersuasive.
Right? So they do mean the same thing.
What did I say unpersuasive was? I said something different. What did I say unpersuasive was? That entails. That entails that. That doesn't mean they're identical.
Said unpersuasive means you not knowing what the thrust is.
Maybe I said it wrong. Maybe I did. I don't know. But what I'm saying, and maybe they are the same thing. That's fine.
I said this wrong. I said that wrong. Look,
Mason.
Then clarify what you're saying, because you're starting to annoy me now.
Yeah, you're getting on my nerves too, dude.
You keep saying things that look like contradictions because you won't fucking get clear on how you're defining terms.
Fair enough.
I told you multiple times these mean the same thing. You kept denying that. Now you're seeing that they do mean the same thing.
Fair enough, Mason. I will take all the blame if it will get you to calm the fuck down. Okay, cool. I'll take all the blame. It's completely my fault. Unequivocally, totally my fault. That's it. There we go. I fucked up. They're the same thing. Whatever. Does this mean something different to you? So if I say that they're unpersuasive and I say that it's pointless, you're agreeing that both of those things are true, correct?
Yeah, which is to say, we don't know. Sure, I agree. Yeah. And to be clear, when we say that they're unpersuasive and we're pointless, all that's being agreed to here is that we both don't know if Ask Yourself has the goal of persuading somebody of some proposition being true or false when he's using NTT. That's all that's being said there. Yeah, we agree.
It's not particularly it might not seem like a problem, but if he's trying to, he's kind of doing a bad job of it, don't you think?
That's just gonna bad. Like, just gonna. I can ask you what
that's
the norm
a yes
for
or
bad
no.
is. What's the norm for bad? What's the norm for bad?
He's failing to do so. He's failing to convey the point.
Well, we don't know. We could say that we don't know if he's failing. That would because if we don't know what the thrust is, it doesn't mean there is none. So we could say we don't know if he's we can't say we can't say he is failing because that's just not what the claim we're making. We're just saying. We're not convinced that he's succeeding.
I said if he is trying, then he is failing.
If his goal is to get people to know that he's trying to convince people of some proposition,
to make a point, yeah.
Yeah, I think I can grant if his goal is to make everybody aware that when he uses NTT, he's trying to convince people or he's trying to convince someone of some proposition being true or false. Yeah, I can agree he's failing with respect to that goal. Just not granted. Of course, I don't know if we're just saying we don't know if he has that goal or not.
Yeah, well, I mean, it like I said, if he is attempting to do so, he's doing so poorly. He's doing a bad job of it. Is the point? That's all that's really being said here. So,
now, is there anything else you have, or is that all?
I think that's enough to say. I'm just going to be kind of dismissive without knowing what the point of it is. I don't see why I would engage with it, so to speak. I'm going well, why would I? What's the point? And if you're literally going, I don't know, and he's going, I mean, maybe I could ask AY, and he might say, I don't know. I mean, if you have a point, maybe you've used NTT, presumably. Have you used it before?
Have I used NTT? I mean, yeah.
Was there ever a proposition that you were trying to convince somebody of using it? If so, what was it?
Oh, okay. You're asking me what, I mean, yeah, there are cases where sometimes I might use NTT to convince people, at least of some. It might be some kind of weaker proposition, something around the lines of generally speaking, consuming factory farm animals is wrong or something. And that might be a proposition I try to convince people of using NTT.
do you think that NTT can, in principle, convince people of that one?
Oh yeah, sure. I don't see a contradiction there.
Well, I don't see like a contradiction. I just don't see that the method seems to match the proposition.
Well, you asked me in principle. Presumably, that just means if it's logically possible.
No, I mean it's logically possible that if I threaten to punch you, it's going to convince you that there's a piece of gold.
Are you asking me if it's like likely? I don't have a view on the sort of statistical claim. And what are you asking?
No, I'm saying, does it actually follow from anything about NTT that factory farming is somehow like immoral?
I don't know what I mean. I don't know what you mean by that. But to be
Well,
clear,
let's just write down. Let's write it down so I don't forget it. Actually, sorry.
Yeah,
can you say that?
You can
I
write it
didn't mean
down.
to.
You can type it out in the chat. But to be clear, you can type it out. But to be clear, when you asked me, does NTT convince people these things? All I'm interpreting that is like, does NTT kind of like start this kind of process of reflection that might cause somebody to adjust their credence towards some. That's what I'm talking about roughly. If you have some other semantics, you can clarify those. But
well, I'm more so talking about does that even follow from the method? Like does the conclusion? What was can you say the thrust for me again? Like what you thought it was?
Well, yeah. I said there are cases where I've used the dialogue with the goal of convincing somebody of some proposition along. This might not be totally accurate, but some proposition along the lines of, generally speaking, it's wrong to consume factory farmed meat or something.
It's wrong to consume.
Yeah.
Factory farming.
And to be clear, when I say that I have, when I say I have the goal of convincing them of that, all I'm saying is like, I have the goal of like, using this kind of tool in a way that, allows them to kind of reflect on their values and potentially adjust their credence towards that proposition.
So let's say I can't account for how I can ethically consume factory farming meat. Does it follow that it's not, that is generally speaking, because it seems like NTT is attempting to ask me for an account, like something like what's the morally relevant difference between them, something like that, or what's the point at which that it's okay to consume this animal but not this one, like what's the morally relevant differences? Does it follow that if I can't answer that generally speaking it's wrong to consume factory farmed meat?
If you're asking like some strict implication of, no, of course not, but that's just not what I meant by convincing. Did you remember what I meant by convincing?
Okay, yeah. So, no. Can you give me the definition of convincing?
I said, when I said in this context, when I say I have the goal to convince them of this sort of thing, all I'm saying is like, I'm trying to, start like this sort of like, I'm trying to get them to kind of reflect on the things they care about. And I want that sort of reflection to adjust their credence on the proposition that was specified earlier. So
sure, it might happen. It might happenstantially get them to go, maybe generally.
I don't know what happenstantially means there.
Well, like I could give you an argument that is like fallacious, right? And it could convince you of something, right? I could successfully convince you of something through fallacious reasoning, through like without the conclusion actually following or anything like that.
I still don't know what you mean by happenstantially.
Well, in the same way as like for instance, if I poke you and you suddenly believe that there's a rock on the other side of the moon made of gold, right? There's nothing about the action that connects to the actual belief, right?
Does that just mean something like the action that was performed is generally statistically unlikely of convincing people of things? Because if that's true, then I don't know what you mean.
Well, what I mean is that does it actually follow from the method? Like for instance, scientific inquiry.
If you just mean that strict implication, I already said it doesn't follow. I don't know why you're repeating.
Well, I mean, does it even follow as an evidential case?
Is that just to make a claim? Is that just to ask? Is it likely for this sort of reflection process to cause somebody to adjust their credence? Because if that's talking about likelihood, that's just some statistics claim that I'm not like aware of.
Again, no. I've said a dozen times no. What it means is not just that it's likely to convince someone. It's like, is this actually a rational conclusion that would be drawn from the method that is NTT? Like I would imagine that
if you're just using vague language, like earlier,
what is vague about rational conclusions?
If earlier you said use the term rational method and you refuse to explain what that means, now you're using rational conclusion. If it's some like vague thing that you also refuse to define, then I don't really know how that'll help me.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you now. I apologize. That's just like a utter misrepresentation. My inability to be like, okay, well, let me define this further is not like me refusing to do something, right?
Are you going to give an account of what a rational conclusion is?
Well, does it someone that follows from whatever method you're using in this instance?
If it just if by follows, you're just talking about that strict implication earlier. I already said it doesn't follow, but it said then you said after by follows you meant something else, something about like
Well, no, I don't mean
like-
deductively. I mean, is it even like an evidential case for it? I don't think
okay,
it is.
and if evidential case, then I don't even know what you like. So, like, are you saying something like what by evidential case? Are you referring to like the likelihood of? No, you said you're not referring to likelihood. Are you saying like if are you saying like some proposition or set of propositions or prompts within the flow? Are you saying like these things like can be used or can you use to like construe an argument that raises the likelihood of the proposition being true? Is that the idea?
Oh yeah, raising the probability that the proposition there is true. That's fine. The part that was objectionable is about it being convincing, like whether or not it's going to raise the probability of it convincing someone like that. No, I don't know about that.
I don't think like so for me it might even just be a category error, like because I don't take NTT, so to speak. Arguments that are supposed to like raise the likelihood of certain conclusions being true, right? I don't take I take that to be a property of arguments, which again NTT is not an argument. But if you're so you could ask that way, I'll just say like no, that'd just be a category error. But if you're asking me something like does NTT does the process NTT prompt raise the likelihood that somebody will change their view? That could be a statistical claim that's discussed, but then I might not have the answers there. That just depends on like empirics.
Yeah, well, I'm more so just asking if let's say for instance you run NTT on me and I can't give you the answer. I don't know. Does this in any way raise the probability that generally speaking it's wrong to consume factory farm? You said no to this, right? It doesn't do that.
No, like hold up 1 second. There's two
Because
interpretations
it's not
of
an
this.
argument, right?
If the first thing is the argument interpretation, for example, it's an argument that should then no, that'd be a category error. But if it's the second interpretation where it's like this process of reflection raises the likelihood that's to somebody that they actually have or they could have potentially the sort of preferences that involve that will commit them to saying that factory farm meat is wrong, whatever. That's an empirical question. So there's two interpretations. The first one I'll just say, of course not, that's a category error. And the second one I'll just say that's an empirical question.
So the instance here is like, well, then why is it that you're trying to use this to convince someone of it? If the thing you're trying to convince it of, if I say, hey, it doesn't seem to follow from it, you go, that's a category error. Why are you trying to use it to convince someone of something if it's not an argument?
Right, because this is getting kind of lost. Because look, if by convince, look, let's say we have two notions of convince. Convince one, where convince is something like I give you an argument where the conclusion is like this is likely or this is true, or convince two, where I sort of I talk to you, and I kind of prompt you, in a way that potentially will cause you to adjust your credence on a certain position. There's two notions of convince. I'm not saying it's anything convince one. That's just weird. That's like a category error on given what I take NTT to be. But I am saying, it could be, I do have the goal, at least some cases, for it to use it on convince two. And I'm saying whether or not it's generally successful in convince two is just an empirical question.
Yeah, so this is just to say now I'm gonna have to like levy what it means to be a sophist, because like a sophist is gonna use some sort of like rhetorical strategy. They're gonna use something where the conclusion doesn't really follow, but it might be able to persuade you, say for instance, of the proposition, generally speaking, it's wrong to consume factory farming. So for instance, presuppositional apologetics is a great example of sophistry. What they do is they want to convince you that you should be a Christian. Just a second.
Understand.
Just a second. Like I said, stop interrupting. So because this is also for the audience too. It's not just for you.
Fine. You can go ahead and give example, whatever.
Cool. So presuppositional apologetics, the thrust doesn't follow from the method, right? So the method is I'm going to ask you about your worldview and I'm going to analyze your worldview. And if you can't do it, well, what follows from that? Well, they think the thrust is that you cannot have knowledge absent the Christian God, right? In this instance, you have, generally speaking, it's wrong to consume factory farming meat. It might happenstantially convince you of that, right? I might not recognize the flaw in it and see like, wait, even if I can't account for this, there's nothing that follows from this that means it's generally speaking wrong to consume factory farming meat, even if I don't have a good answer to this, right? And so what you're doing is essentially, methodologically speaking, it's almost the same as like what I would say a precept is.
Okay, I guess you really had to say all that. Look, again, if when you say if when you say it's using sophistry, or if it's if it's like I'm a sophistry or whatever, if all you mean is that NTT isn't an argument with a conclusion that some proposition is true or that some proposition is likely, then yeah, that's trivial. I'll just grant you that. Okay. Like, to be clear, by sophist here, all he means is that NTT isn't an argument with a conclusion that.
Well, no. I said I was responding to your second kind of convincing. It's the kind of convincing that presuppositional apologetics uses. So
Okay,
the
to be clear,
conclusion doesn't actually follow,
yeah.
but someone might be persuaded to be a Christian after dealing with presuppositional apologetics.
I mean, to be clear, please don't like to say there is a conclusion for like something like a dialogue flow is a category error. So like that language is like weirding me out. But just to be clear, if all you mean by sophist is somebody who uses like some dialogue tool that's supposed to like kind of prompt people to, or some dialogue tool to prompt somebody to reflect and adjust their credence on something, if that's all you mean by sophist, then I'll just agree with that as well.
Well, is that what I said? I gave you the specific reason. I don't think that's what I said.
I thought the definition was a sophist. Like I thought your definition was using, trying to convince somebody on the convince two notion, as opposed to the convince one notion.
Trying to convince someone of something using what?
Using like something that isn't like strictly an argument that concludes that proposition is true or likely.
Something where the
using like using a dialogue flow to prompt like a type of reflection basically.
Yeah, it's a conclusion that just doesn't come, that isn't supported. This conclusion, generally speaking, it's wrong to consume factory farming meat. In this instance, it would look like a conclusion if it was put into an argument form, I think. So that's why I'm using that term, even though it's inaccurate. It's
but please don't.
Even a dialogue tree is going to have like
that language.
Okay, I can just use the thrust. Sure, I'll just use the thrust. The thrust of the argument, the central point, doesn't seem to be conveyed by the dialogue flow tree in any meaningful way.
And by conveyed, you're just talking. Are you talking about like conveyed? Just seems to be convinced again. Are you talking about let's say convey one, where convey one is like giving a syllogism with the conclusion, or convey two, which is like prompting a reflection process for somebody to adjust their credence?
Yeah, it's definitely two. It's definitely two that you're trying to do.
So
but I think that this method rationally shouldn't do that. It shouldn't prompt someone to actually it should prompt someone to reflect on their views, but it shouldn't adjust their credence to the point where it says generally speaking it's wrong to consume factory farming.
Now this is a different claim. So when you now to be clear, the claim here is the dialogue should not prompt somebody to adjust their credence. When you say it should not, what's the norm there?
So I'm talking about just rationality here. So I'm just saying, like, when something
that you won't define.
I think again you're kind of like deflecting, and I'm getting a little bit frustrated.
Look, if this all just keeps boiling down to like these sort of vague terms that you refuse to give accounts for, then I don't know.
If you don't know what when something rationally convinces you versus not rationally convincing you, I'm not going to take that seriously. I'm not trying to be rude.
Look, yeah, it just seems like all these critiques just boil down to these vague notions that you refuse to give accounts for. So,
well, I mean, hey, look, the argument seems to boil down here too. Cool, we can end it, but the argument seems to boil down to this vagary as well. And so, if you have a problem with vagueness, I mean, you should have a problem with NTT, shouldn't you?
Okay, yeah. Now, just to summarize everything, now, so the first critique basically, we had a definition of thrust with two conditions. And then you refused to, or you said you didn't want to give an account of one of the terms in the second condition. So I wasn't clear.
I didn't say I didn't want to. That's false.
Well, you said you weren't able to, or something like that.
I said I don't know how to do it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that under certain under how I used certain terms, they'll follow. But like, yeah, if you don't want to say that, that's fine. I'll just say you said you weren't able, or you didn't know how to convey the concept of that to me. So to be clear, I don't know what the first critique is. Now, for the second critique, it was just a modified account of thrust that only had the first condition. And to be clear, I agreed with this because just to be clear again, all the critique amounted to was when AY uses NTT, we're both agnostic as to whether or not he has the goal to convince somebody of a proposition. So all the critique is like so the critique literally just is when AY uses NTT, you don't know if he has the goal to convince somebody of some proposition, which I agree with. Okay, that's the second one. And then there's some notion of the third one, but that just rests on some vague concept I'm not clear on. So that's just to summarize everything.
I didn't give three. It's all the same critique. So the critique is it's just the same critique. So the idea is essentially without a thrust, he's not going to have a point, so it's going to be pointless, right? That's just if he doesn't have a point that he's conveying to me. If he does, he's failing to do so, right? But without it,
Yeah,
it's
well,
going to be pointless.
we can
So
just
at
say
minimum,
whatever the
he's
third one was.
failing. He's failing to make it point full, right?
We can
At
just
minimum,
we can just
if
say
I can,
we could just say whatever I labeled as the third one is something that I would say there was a different one, but I'll just say it was something that's downstream from the second one. I'm fine with using that language as well. Yeah, but that's all I have to say unless you want to add anything.
Yeah, so I think you thought there were three critiques. It was all the same critique, and that's
Okay.
the critique was not very well summarized. So the summary is that if I don't have a point, I don't have a thrust, right? It's going to end up being without a point, which like if at minimum it either doesn't have a point or at minimum I don't know what the fuck the point is. You don't seem to know what the fuck the point is. I don't know anyone who knows what the fuck the point is. So I just go, hey, it seems pointless to me, right? It just seems pointless. And then I say, okay,
well,
cool. Well, if it doesn't have a point, then it can't be persuasive because there's no point to persuade me to, right? And so it's unpersuasive by that measure.
Yeah,
and then the
perfect,
last part
sure.
of it was when the last critique was a critique specifically of your view, which was that you used it to try to convey the idea
so
that
there was a
generally
different
speaking
last
it's
critique.
wrong. Well, it was there was only one critique of AYs. You said there were three critiques, and there was only
Well, I
one
said
critique
three,
of
like
AY.
general. I mean, well, I'm just like using that generally to talk about all the points.
Oh, that's
brought up
fine.
here.
That's fine. Maybe I misunderstood you there. And then the last part was that you were trying to use it to convey the point. Generally speaking, it's wrong to consume factory farmed meat, and I just think that that's sophistry because it doesn't even seem to follow from the methodology.
Yeah, and
That's the critique.
and to be clear, whatever the last one is, that just rests on some like term you're using that you refuse to define multiple times.